The wind carried the scent of rain and smoke across the open plains that night. A wild mixture of fear and something she didn't yet understand. The moon hung pale over the canyon, lighting the silver edges of the sagebrush, and her heart beat as if trying to match the rhythm of the storm building in the distance. She had been told all her life that Apaches were dangerous, that no woman should wander near their land. Yet here she stood, barely breathing, as one of them watched her from the shadows. He didn't move at first. Just stood there, tall and silent, his dark hair brushed by the wind, his chest marked with the faint traces of paint that caught the moonlight. His eyes were steady, calm, like a mountain that had seen too many storms to fear another. She had seen men stare before Anch hands, travelers, cowboys who tried to act tough but never like this. His gaze wasn't hungry or cruel. It was searching, quiet, as if he was trying to understand why she trembled. Her father had built their ranch near the river, where the wild horses came to drink. It was land no one had truly claimed, not even the soldiers who rode patrols. They called it the border country, a place between the white man's law and the Apache's heartland. She had grown up hearing gunfire from far ridges and drums from the valleys. And sometimes, when the wind shifted, songs in a language she didn't know. But that night, when her horse spooked and threw her, it wasn't the soldiers who found her, it was him. He had appeared out of the darkness, like a spirit from the old stories. Kneeling beside her as she gasped for breath, his hand touched her shoulder, warm and careful. The blood on her arm had already dried when she looked up into his face, and for a moment she forgot the danger, forgot the warnings, forgot everything except the way his eyes softened. "You shouldn't be here," he had said quietly, his voice rough like the wind scraping over stone. "And you shouldn't have helped me," she answered, though her words came out weaker than she meant them to. He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "A wounded thing deserves care, no matter where it falls." That night, under the mesquite tree, where he had carried her to rest, she felt something change inside her. It wasn't fear, though her heart raced. It was something else, something she didn't have a name for yet. The Apache made a small fire, speaking softly to his horse in his native tongue. She watched his hands, the way they moved with purpose, the way he handled every task with quiet patience. When he brought her water, she tried not to meet his eyes, but when she did, she found herself lost in them. There was strength there, but also sorrow, like someone who had seen too much of both war and love. She wanted to ask his name, but her voice caught. The only thing she could whisper was, "Does it hurt to love for the first time?" He didn't answer right away. The fire cracked softly between them, and the air felt heavier than before. Then he leaned closer, his shadow falling across her face, and he murmured in a voice that sent warmth through her chest, "Easy. I'll be gentle." The sound of his words lingered long after. By morning, the storm had passed, but her world was no longer the same. He helped her onto his horse, guiding her carefully through the canyon trail that twisted between red cliffs. Every so often, he would glance back to make sure she was all right, his expression unreadable. She had grown up around men who spoke too much, who laughed loud and made promises they never kept. But this man, he spoke with his eyes more than his mouth, and every word carried the weight of truth. When they reached the ridge overlooking her ranch, she could see smoke rising from the chimney and riders gathered near the corral. Her father's men. If they saw the Apache, they'd open fire without asking why. "You can't go down there with me," she whispered. He looked at the ranch, then back at her. "They would not understand, they'd kill you." He gave a faint, almost sad smile. "They've been trying to for years." She wanted to tell him to run, to disappear into the hills, but before she could speak, a gunshot echoed from the valley. She flinched. He reached out, steadying her by the wrist. His touch was gentle, but firm enough to make her still. "You belong with your people," he said quietly. "But you're the one who saved me." He turned his gaze toward the horizon. "That does not make me safe." She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that not everyone at the ranch hated his kind. But even she knew that would be a lie. The hatred between their worlds ran deeper than the canyons, older than her lifetime. When he finally led her horse toward the slope, she could see the tension in his shoulders. He stopped halfway down and turned to her. They will not believe you if you tell them I was here. Say you found your way home alone, and if they come after you?" He paused. The wind tugged at his hair as he said, "Then I will keep riding until they forget my face." But she knew she would never forget his, that night. After the men at the ranch questioned her, and the doctor bandaged her arm, she lay awake listening to the thunder fading in the distance. The scent of wet earth filled her room, and through the window she could see the faint light of the moon. Somewhere out there, beyond the ridges, he was riding back into his world. She wondered if he was thinking of her too. Days turned into weeks, but the memory of him wouldn't fade. When she rode out alone, she found herself stopping near the river, searching the far bank for any sign of him. Sometimes she thought she saw smoke rising in the distance or a figure watching from the hills. But she could never be sure. The people at the ranch noticed her restlessness. Her father warned her again about crossing into Apache land, telling her stories of raids and burned homesteads. But she had seen the truth with her own eyes. The man she met wasn't a monster. He was human, fierce, proud, and burdened by the same loneliness she felt. One evening, when the sun bled across the desert sky, she rode out farther than before. The world felt still, the kind of quiet that comes before something changes forever. Then she saw him again standing beside his horse near the edge of the river. He didn't move until she crossed the shallow water. "You came back," he said softly. "I had to." "Why?" She hesitated. "Because I don't want to forget what I felt that night." He studied her face, his expression caught somewhere between disbelief and longing. The air around them felt charged, like the earth itself was holding its breath. "You shouldn't be here," he said again, though his voice lacked conviction this time. "Then tell me to leave," she whispered. He didn't. Instead, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The warmth of his hand sent a shiver through her. "Does it hurt?" she asked again, her voice trembling. He looked at her with eyes that held both gentleness and warning. "Only if you fight it." For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of the river filled the silence between them. Then he took her hand, guiding it slowly to rest over his heart. She could feel it beating strong and steady beneath her palm. "Now you know," he said quietly. Her breath caught. She didn't understand what was happening, only that something inside her had changed forever. But before she could speak, a distant shout broke the spell. From across the plain came the faint glint of rifles and riders galloping toward them. Her father's men. The Apache's jaw tightened. "They followed you." Her heart pounded as he pulled her toward his horse. "We have to go," he said, his tone low but urgent. She hesitated, torn between the world she came from and the one she had just begun to feel. "Trust me," he said, his voice steady even as danger closed in, and as he lifted her onto his horse. The wind carried the sound of gunfire across the plains, leaving the question of love, danger, and fate hanging in the air like the echo of a promise yet to be fulfilled. The horse's hooves thundered across the plains, cutting through the tall grass wet from the night rain. She clung to the Apache's back, feeling the strength in his body as he urged the animal forward. The sound of the riders chasing them grew faint behind, swallowed by the echo of the canyon walls. Wind whipped through her hair, carrying the taste of dust and adrenaline. She didn't dare look back. Every beat of the horse's gallop carried her farther from everything she'd known her father's ranch. Her old life, the rules that had once seemed so sure. When they finally slowed, the sky had turned from gold to gray. The Apache led the horse up a narrow trail that wound between red rocks. She could see the smoke of the ranch fading far in the distance, tiny and unreal. Her breath came shallow, but not only from the ride. She realized, for the first time, that she had crossed a line that could never be undone. He stopped at a ridge where a single cedar tree clung to the rock. The land below stretched for miles, broken by dry riverbeds and patches of sage. He dismounted and helped her down. His hand lingered just a moment too long, rough and warm against hers. "They won't follow us here," he said quietly. Her voice shook. "You sound sure?" "I know how your people hunt," he replied, looking toward the horizon. "They follow tracks until they vanish in the stone. Then they turned back. They don't understand this land. She looked at him, trying to read the calm in his face. And what happens now? He met her gaze, his dark eyes steady. Now, you go home. She frowned. Home, after what they saw? They'll think you took me. They'll come for you. He didn't answer at first. He picked up a handful of dry sand, letting it sift through his fingers. Then let them come, he said at last. A man cannot hide from his own fate. The words carried something heavy, something she couldn't yet grasp. She wanted to ask him more, but a sudden gust of wind sent dust swirling between them. He turned away and began leading the horse toward a rocky pass. She followed, unsure why her heart felt torn between fear and something that almost felt like belonging. By the time the sun climbed high, they reached a valley hidden between two cliffs. There, nestled among the rocks, stood a small wickiup made from branches and woven grass. It wasn't much, just a circle of earth and shade, but it felt alive, as if the land itself had built it for him. Nearby, a stream whispered over the stones. "This is your home?" she asked softly. "For now," he said. "It gives shelter when the nights turn cold." He loosened the horse's reins and began tending to the fire pit near the entrance. She stood uncertain, her boots sinking into the red dirt. There was a strange peace in the air, no fences. No gunshots, no voices telling her who she should be. Only wind, the sound of water, and him. As he worked, she found herself watching the way his hands moved. There was no hurry in him, no waste of motion. Every task gathering wood, striking flint. Feeding the flames seemed done with a quiet respect, as if he believed the world was alive and listening. When he finally looked up, he caught her watching. She turned away quickly, but not before she saw the faint smile in his eyes. "You've never been beyond your ranch before," he said. She shook her head. "My father kept me close. Said it wasn't safe." He nodded, adding more sticks to the fire. He was right. But danger isn't always where men say it is. His words stayed with her. As the day passed, he showed her how to drink from the stream without stirring the mud, how to read the trail of a deer from the smallest track, how to listen for silence before the rain. His voice was calm, patient, almost soothing. She wanted to ask him about his people, about his life before this place. But she sensed he carried memories he didn't share easily. That night, when the fire burned low, she asked quietly, "Do you have a family?" He stared into the flames. Once, she waited, but he didn't go on. The firelight danced across his face, and she could see the sadness there, not the kind that makes a man weak, but the kind that builds walls around his heart. "What happened to them?" she whispered. He looked up at the stars. "The war took them. The bluecoats came one winter. They burned the lodges. Took the ones who lived away?" Her throat tightened. "I'm sorry," he nodded slightly. "The earth remembers. I buried them where the river bends east." She felt something shift between them then, a thread of understanding that neither words nor silence could break. She wanted to reach out, to touch his hand, but something in his stillness stopped her. He wasn't a man who sought comfort. He was a man who had already lost everything worth clinging to in the days that followed. She helped him gather roots, fetch water, and mend the horse's gear. The rhythm of their days grew quiet, almost like a song without words. She found herself smiling more than she had in months, though she didn't fully understand why. Still, there were moments when she'd see a shadow cross his face, a reminder that peace was only borrowed, never promised. Sometimes at dawn, he would ride out alone, disappearing over the ridge with his bow slung across his back. She would wait, pretending not to worry, though her chest felt hollow, until he returned. One afternoon, as they sat near the fire, she asked, "Do you hate us?" He looked up slowly. "Your people?" "Yes." He poked the fire with a stick, watching the sparks rise. "I hate what was done. But hate is a heavy thing. It kills slower than bullets. Then why did you save me?" He met her eyes. "Because you looked at me like I was human." Her breath caught. She wanted to say something, anything, but her voice failed her. She realized then that he carried more scars inside him than the land had hills, and somehow She wanted to understand every one of them that night. Thunder rolled again over the mountains. The smell of rain returned, thick and heavy. She sat just inside the wickiup, watching the firelight flicker on his face. The wind pushed at the walls, and the world outside felt as if it might split open. He looked toward the darkening sky. "Storm's coming fast." "Not afraid," she said. He turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "You should be. The world changes after a storm." Lightning tore through the clouds, and she flinched at the sound. He reached out instinctively, his hand brushing her arm. The warmth of his touch sent a jolt through her chest. She met his eyes, and for a heartbeat neither moved. The sound of rain began to fall in sheets, drowning out everything else. But before she could speak, a distant crack split the night gunfire. He froze. "They found us," he said under his breath. Her heart lurched. "How?" "No one knew where we went." "Tracks," he muttered, grabbing his rifle. Someone followed, stepped out into the rain, scanning the cliffs. The sky flashed again, revealing dark shapes moving through the brush below. She crawled closer to the entrance, her pulse racing. "Your father's men?" She whispered. "Maybe," he said, his voice steady but cold. "Or worse." The words sent a chill through her. He crouched low, his eyes sharp. The rain slicked his hair against his shoulders, but his movements were silent, controlled. "What do we do?" He looked at her, his face half lit by the fire's glow. "If they come closer, you ride east. Don't stop until you reach the canyon trail." "I won't leave you." He shook his head. "You have to. They'll think I took you. If they catch you here, you'll hang beside me." Her hands trembled. "I can't just run." His eyes softened for the first time since the thunder started. "You have a choice now. Don't throw it away from me." The shouts grew louder. She could see torchlight flickering through the rain. The firelight painted his face in shades of red and gold. Like a warrior from some half-forgotten legend, he moved toward the mouth of the wickiup and paused. "If I fall, remember what I told you?" he said. She swallowed hard. "What was that?" "Don't fight what you feel. Let it guide you." Before she could answer, he stepped into the storm. She watched him disappear into the rain, the flashes of lightning revealing him for brief, broken moments of figure alone against the fury of men and sky. Her chest ached with fear and something deeper, something that burned even through the cold. The wind howled across the valley, and the sound of gunfire echoed once more. She clutched her coat tightly, her breath shaking as the truth settled in whatever happened next. Nothing in her life would ever be the same again. The rain came down in heavy sheets, turning the ground into rivers of mud and smoke. The crack of rifles echoed through the canyon as the Apache moved like a shadow among the rocks. He didn't fire yet. He was watching, waiting, counting the torches that flickered through the storm. There were too many. He recognized the voices shouting orders ranch hands. Not soldiers, but they were armed like men ready for war. And he knew what they wanted. To them, he wasn't a man. He was a threat to be erased, a reminder that the land didn't belong to them as much as they claimed. Inside the wickiup, she pressed her hands against her ears, trying not to hear the thunder of gunfire. Her heart was beating too fast, every sound sharp and terrifying. She could see his bow and rifle leaning near the fire, and the scent of smoke mixed with wet earth filled her lungs. She wanted to run after him, but his warning echoed in her head. If they caught her with him, it would end worse for them both. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. She crawled to the entrance, her breath trembling. Through the thin branches, she could see flashes of light from torches below. Men were spreading out, shouting her name. Her father's voice rose above the rest, full of anger and fear. "Find her. Don't let that savage touch her again." Her stomach twisted. The man who had raised her, who had taught her how to ride, shoot, and survive the plains, was now hunting the one who had saved her life. She didn't know what was right anymore. Then she saw movement near the creek, dark figures running through the brush. One of them fell. A cry rang out. Her pulse froze. It wasn't the Apache's voice. Another man yelled for help. Then silence. He appeared moments later, slipping through the rain like a ghost, his rifle slung across his shoulder. Blood streaked his arm, but he didn't slow. When he reached the wickiup, his eyes found hers instantly. "You shouldn't still be here," he said, his breath heavy but calm. "They're looking for me," she whispered. "My father's with them, I know." He tore a strip of cloth from his shirt, wrapping it around the wound on his arm. "They'll keep searching until dawn. We can't stay." "Where will we go?" He looked toward the north ridge, into the old canyons. "The land there hides better than any man." She hesitated, her fear battling against her trust. "They'll never stop. My father won't rest until you're dead." He met her gaze, his voice low. "Then I'll die standing, not running." She stared at him, realizing he wasn't speaking with pride, but with the calm of someone who had made peace with death long ago. That frightened her more than the gunfire. By the time the first light of morning touched the sky, they were far from the valley. The rain had washed away most of their tracks, and the air smelled of pine and smoke. The Apache led her through narrow trails cut deep into the rocks. Moving with the quiet grace of someone who belonged to the land, she followed closely, her boots slipping in the mud. Her heart still heavy, with the sound of her father's voice calling her name in the storm. As they climbed higher, she began to notice carvings in the stone walls, old symbols and handprints, faded but still visible. She reached out to touch one. "Your people made these?" He nodded. "Before the soldiers came?" "Before the lines were drawn. What do they mean?" He looked at the marks, his expression softening. "Stories, prayers, some speak of love, some of war. All remind us that nothing stays forever." They stopped beside a large rock overhang where the earth was dry. He built a small fire while she tried to catch her breath. The flames danced weakly, their light bouncing off the canyon walls. She noticed he hadn't spoken much since the night before. There was a quiet wait between them, something left unsaid. "Were you hurt badly?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just a scratch." She frowned. "That's not what I meant." He glanced up, studying her face. "You're asking if I've killed?" Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. "Yes," he said. "But only when I had no choice. There are men who fight for pride, and men who fight to live. I've done both." She looked into the fire, the orange light flickering in her eyes. "And now I fight to protect what little I still believe in." His words struck something deep inside her. She wanted to tell him that she believed in him too, but the sound of a faraway gunshot cut through the moment. They both froze. "They're still tracking us," he said quietly. "Then we can't stop here." He nodded, dousing the fire with a sweep of his hand. The smoke curled upward, thin and gray, vanishing into the dawn. As they moved deeper into the canyons, she began to understand how much he knew about the land. He could read the ground like a map, broken twigs, the turn of a leaf, the faintest print in the sand. She followed his lead, but her thoughts wandered back to the ranch. What would they think when they found her gone again? Would her father believe she had been taken? Or would he realize she had gone willingly? They reached a narrow pass where the cliffs rose high on both sides. He stopped, motioning for her to stay quiet. There was movement ahead, riders crossing the far ridge. From their hats and rifles, she recognized them instantly. "Ranch hands, don't move," he whispered. The riders paused at the edge of the trail, scanning the canyon. One pointed down toward the stream. "Tracks." She swallowed hard, gripping his arm. "They found us." He looked around quickly, his eyes sharp. "There's a cave not far from here. Stay behind me." They slipped between the rocks, moving low until they reached a narrow opening half hidden by brush. Inside, the air was cool and still. The light dimmed until they could barely see each other. He set his rifle down and listened. The sound of hooves grew louder, then stopped. Voices echoed faintly outside. "They're close," she whispered. He nodded. "If they come in, they won't leave." Her pulse pounded. She could hear the fear in her own breathing. "I don't want anyone to die because of me." He turned to her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes the world chooses for us." Minutes passed like hours. The sound of footsteps scraped against stone. A man's voice called out, "You can't hide forever." The girls coming home one way or another? Her heart clenched. It was her father. The Apache's jaw tightened. He reached for his knife, but stopped. She touched his arm, shaking her head.
Please?
Don't hurt him, he hesitated, the conflict clear in his eyes. Then he drew back slowly. The footsteps moved away, fading with the sound of retreating hooves. Silence settled again. She sank to the ground, her hands trembling. He crouched beside her, his voice softer now. You see how the land teaches? Sometimes survival is not about strength, but patience. She looked at him through tears. He'll never forgive me for this. Then you must learn to forgive yourself. They stayed hidden until dusk, when the last light turned the rocks deep red. Outside, the wind carried the faint smell of smoke campfires miles away. She wondered if her father had stopped for the night, if he thought she was alive or dead. As darkness grew, he began to hum quietly, a low, haunting melody that echoed against the stone. She listened, drawn to the sound. What's that song? It's a song for the lost, he said. For those searching for their way back. Do you think I'll find mine? He looked at her then, his eyes steady. That depends on what you're looking for. She wanted to answer, but her throat felt tight. She didn't know anymore what she wanted to go home, or to stay where she finally felt seen. Later that night, as the firelight danced against the cave walls, she lay awake listening to the wind. She could feel his presence nearby, silent but close, and somehow that made her feel safer than she ever had before. Yet deep down, she knew the danger was far from over. Her father would not stop searching. And when he found them, the truth she feared most would come out, that she wasn't his helpless daughter anymore, and that her heart no longer belonged to the world she'd been born into. Outside, an owl cried into the night, its voice carrying across the canyon. The Apache stirred, but didn't rise. His eyes opened, and he watched the fire fade to embers. He knew what was coming. The peace between them was only a pause before the next storm. The land had a way of testing those who dared to love across lines drawn in blood. And the test had only just begun. The morning came with the sound of wind scraping against the rocks, dry and restless. The Apache had barely slept. Every instinct told him the peace they'd found in that cave wouldn't last. He could feel the land shifting, like it knew what was coming. He stood at the entrance, watching the sky turn from gray to pale gold, and the first thin column of smoke rose far to the south. It wasn't from their fire. It was a signal. Someone was tracking them. She woke to the smell of smoke and fear. When she saw his expression, she knew before he spoke that something had changed. They found us, didn't they? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded once. Not yet. But soon. How can you be so sure? Because that smoke isn't from your father's camp, he said quietly. It's from soldiers. Cavalry. Her heart sank. The soldiers meant no mercy. They didn't care who was guilty or innocent. To them, an Apache seen near a white rancher's daughter was a crime worse than death. She stepped forward. We can ride east, toward the ridge. You said they wouldn't follow that far. They will now, he said. The land's turning dry again. Tracks don't hide easy in this light. He looked at her then, and she saw the conflict in his eyes caught between protecting her and facing what he knew was coming. He began packing quickly, a small pouch of dried meat, his knife, his bow. Every motion was silent, precise. Okay. Almost like a man preparing for something he couldn't avoid. She grabbed her coat and went to his side. I'm not leaving you. You might not have a choice. I made one already, she said, her voice trembling but steady. When I stayed, he looked at her for a long time, then gave a single nod. Then we ride north, toward the sacred valley. No one dares enter there. Why not? Because it remembers the dead, he said. By midday, the sun burned white across the desert. They rode fast, their horses kicking up dust that shimmered in the heat. The land ahead rose into a maze of red stone, sharp ridges cutting through the sky like broken teeth. The air smelled of heat and iron. Every sound carried far the cry of a hawk. The faint clatter of hooves behind them, she turned in the saddle. Someone's following. He didn't look back. Keep riding. Through the shimmering haze, shapes began to form riders, distant but closing in. Her stomach twisted. She knew one of them was her father. She would recognize that posture anywhere. Rigid, unbending, proud even in pursuit. He'd never forgive her now. Not for running. Not for choosing this man. The Apache led her off the main trail, down a narrow ravine where the air grew cooler. They dismounted and moved on foot, leading the horses through the shadows. The canyon walls rose high above them, streaked with ancient drawings faded by wind and time. "Whose valley is this?" she whispered. "Mine," he said softly. "And theirs." He nodded toward the carvings, figures of warriors, hunters, mothers holding children. "My ancestors sleep here." The sound of hoofbeats echoed faintly through the stone. He pressed a finger to his lips. They hid behind a boulder, the horses trembling. She could hear her heart pounding louder than the approaching riders. Then came her father's voice, hard and clear. "Spread out. Check the rocks." She gripped the Apache's arm. His jaw tightened, but he stayed still. He knew the land's language, the rhythm of pursuit, the patience of men who hunted out of pride. The soldiers and ranch hands rode through the canyon, torches and rifles flashing in the dim light. They were so close she could see the sweat glinting on their horses' necks. One of them stopped near their hiding place, staring at the ground. He leaned down from the saddle, touching something. A broken horseshoe print. Her breath caught. The Apache moved quietly, drawing his knife. The blade glinted once in the fading sun. The rider turned his head, about to call out, but before the word left his mouth, a sudden gust of wind rushed through the canyon, kicking up dust and sand. The man coughed, shielding his eyes. When the dust settled, they were gone, moved deeper into the rocks, where the canyon split into two narrow paths. For hours, he climbed until the light faded into dusk. When they finally stopped, she could barely stand. The Apache led her to a ledge overlooking the valley below. The air smelled of rain again, but the sky held no clouds, just that strange heavy stillness that came before something changed forever. He stood beside her, watching the land. "They'll keep coming," he said quietly. "Then we'll keep moving," she answered, trying to sound brave. He turned to her. "You don't understand. They'll hunt until one of us falls." She shook her head. "I won't let that happen." He looked at her then, his face caught between pride and sorrow. "You can't stop what's already begun. Then what are you going to do?" she asked. He didn't reply. Instead, he reached into the small leather pouch around his neck and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it slowly, revealing a carved pendant made from bone. It was shaped like a bird with its wings spread wide. "My mother made this," he said, "for protection. It's the last thing I have of her." He took her hand and placed it in her palm. "Keep it. If I fall, it will lead you home." Her eyes filled with tears. "Don't say that." But he didn't take it back. He turned away and started down the slope toward the next ridge, his figure dark against the fading light. She followed, clutching the pendant tightly. The world around them seemed to shrink, the silence pressing closer. When night came, they made camp near a cluster of rocks. The stars burned bright above them, cold and endless. She sat near the fire, staring into the flames. "Tell me something," she said softly. "Before all this, before war and loss, what did you dream of?" He didn't answer right away. "Peace," he said finally, "and a family to share it with." She smiled faintly. "Maybe that's not lost yet." He looked at her then, his eyes holding something she couldn't quite name. "Dreams like that don't belong to men like me." Before she could respond, a crack split the night. Not thunder gunfire. The shot echoed through the canyon. Another followed. He jumped to his feet, grabbing his rifle. "They found us." "How?" "We left no trail." He shook his head. "Someone guided them." Her heart froze. Who would? But she stopped herself. She already knew. Someone from the ranch, maybe a tracker who had followed her father's orders. He scanned the darkness. "Get down." She dropped behind a rock as bullets hit the stones nearby. Sparks flew. The air filled with dust and smoke. He returned fire once, the sound deafening in the narrow space. Voices shouted from below. "Surround them. Don't let him escape." She crawled toward him, terrified. "We can't fight them all." He reloaded calmly, his face set like stone. "I don't need to. I just need to buy you time." "No," she cried, grabbing his arm. "I'm not leaving." He looked at her, eyes burning in the firelight. "You said you wanted to choose. Then choose life." Before she could argue, another bullet hit the ground near them, throwing dust into her face. He pushed her behind the rocks. "Go when I tell you. Follow the north path. Don't stop until you see the white cliffs. I can't leave you. You have to die." The fighting grew louder. The soldiers' torches moved closer, flickering like dying stars. She could see her father among them now, his face pale in the torchlight, shouting orders. "Hold your fire. Bring the girl back alive." Her throat tightened. "He's here." The Apache looked at her one last time, the firelight catching in his eyes. "Then this ends tonight." He stepped out from behind the rocks, moving with silent, deadly grace. The gunfire stopped for a moment as the soldiers saw him tall, unbroken, a shadow rising from the land itself. Her father's voice rang out. "Drop your weapon." He didn't. The world held its breath. She wanted to scream, to run to him, but fear pinned her where she stood. The torches wavered, casting long shadows across the canyon. He stood there, alone, facing a line of rifles aimed straight at him. In that suspended moment, as wind swept across the rocks and the smell of gunpowder filled the air, she realized the truth she had been avoiding all along. This was no longer just about her or her father, or even their worlds colliding. It was about a man fighting for the right to exist, and a woman who had finally seen the cost of what love demanded. Then a gun fired, and everything broke. Into chaos, the gunshot split the air like lightning tearing open the sky. She screamed, her voice lost in the echo that rolled through the canyon. Dust rose from the rocks where the bullet struck, and for one long heartbeat she thought he had fallen. But the Apache was still standing, motionless, the rifle in his hands lowered. His eyes locked on the men who had surrounded him. The soldiers hesitated, unsure. There was something in the way he stood, something that didn't fit the story they'd been told, about savages and raiders. Her father stepped forward, his hat low over his brow, his revolver raised, but trembling. The torchlight flickered across his face, revealing both fury and fear. "Move away from my daughter," he shouted. The Apache didn't speak. The silence was heavier than any bullet. Then slowly he dropped his rifle to the ground and spread his hands. "She's safe," he said quietly. "No harm has come to her." His calm made the men uneasy. Her father's eyes darted toward her, and when he saw her standing behind the rocks, his voice cracked. "Come here now." She wanted to run to him, to end the nightmare, but her legs wouldn't move. "He saved my life," she said, her voice shaking. "He didn't hurt me." "Don't you lie to me," her father growled. "You don't know what these people are capable of." The Apache turned his gaze toward him, steady and unafraid. "You think I don't know hate?" he said. "You think I haven't buried it?" Her father's grip tightened on the revolver. The soldiers shifted uneasily. She saw it then, the fear behind his anger. He wasn't just afraid of losing her. He was afraid of losing control of the world he thought he understood. "I said step away from him." He shouted again. "I won't," she answered. The silence that followed felt endless. Then one of the soldiers, a young man barely older than her, whispered, "Sir, maybe we should listen. She doesn't look hurt." Her father turned sharply. "You don't tell me how to handle my own blood?" The Apache spoke softly, his voice almost kind. "You raised her strong, but you can't cage what's meant to be free." Her father's eyes burned. "You talk about freedom while your kind steals it from others." "No," the Apache said. "It's your kind who taught the land what taking feels like." The words struck like a slap. For a moment, no one moved. Then her father lifted his revolver higher. She could see his finger tightening on the trigger. The Apache didn't reach for his weapon. He didn't even blink. "Please," she cried, running forward. She stepped between them, her hands up. "If you shoot him, you'll have to shoot me too." Her father froze. The gun trembled in his grasp. She saw the confusion in his eyes. The pain of a man watching the one thing he loved most slip away. "I can't lose you," he whispered. "You already will," she said, her voice breaking. "If you do this," for the first time in her life, she saw him falter. His shoulders sank as if the weight of years had finally caught up to him. The revolver lowered, the barrel glinting in the dying light. The Apache's eyes softened, but his body stayed still. "Let her choose," he said quietly. Her father looked between them, his daughter, standing in front of the man he'd hunted. The man who had shown more mercy than any of them expected. Slowly, painfully, he nodded toward the soldiers. "We're leaving," he said hoarsely. One of them protested. "But sir, the orders, I said we're leaving," he barked, his voice like gravel. The men hesitated and began turning their horses. One by one, they faded into the canyon's shadows until only her father remained. He holstered his revolver, his face pale beneath the torchlight. "You'll never be welcome at that ranch again," he said to her. "If you stay with him, you're choosing exile." "Oh." She swallowed hard. "Then I'll live with that." He looked at her one last time. There was no more anger in his eyes, only sorrow. "Your mother would have cried to see this day," he murmured, then turned his horse and rode away, his figure shrinking into the dark until the sound of hooves disappeared. When it was over, the canyon was silent again. The fire had burned low, and the wind carried only the faint scent of gunpowder. She stood there trembling, the reality of what had just happened sinking deep into her bones. The Apache walked to where his rifle lay and picked it up slowly, checking the barrel before slinging it across his shoulder. "You didn't have to protect me like that," she whispered. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I didn't protect you. You protected me." Tears stung her eyes. "He'll never forgive me." He stepped closer, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Forgiveness isn't what you came here for." They didn't speak for a while after that. They just stood together, the moon climbing high over the cliffs, painting the world in silver. When he finally led her to the ridge, the wind felt colder. Below them, the valley stretched out wide and endless. "This land," he said quietly, "it doesn't belong to any of us. It only lets us borrow it for a while." She nodded, following his gaze. "What will happen now?" He hesitated. "Your people won't stop. They'll hunt less for a time, but they'll never forget. The land remembers blood too easily. And what about you?" He looked toward the mountains. "I'll go north. There's a place where the water runs clear, and the trees stand so tall they touch the sky. Maybe there, no one will come looking for ghosts." Her heart tightened. "And me." He turned to her, his voice soft. "That's not for me to decide." For a long moment, she said nothing. The night air wrapped around them, and she felt the weight of everything she had lost and gained. Then she reached for his hand. "If the land allows it," she said, "maybe I'll find you again." He smiled faintly. "If it allows it?" At dawn, she rode south toward the ranch, the bone pendant still warm in her hand. The Apache watched her go, his figure unmoving against the rising sun. The wind carried her hair behind her like a banner, and for a fleeting moment, she looked back. Their eyes met one last time across the valley, two souls bound by something neither of them could explain. Then she turned and disappeared down the trail. When she reached home, the ranch was quiet. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the men were gone. Her father's horse stood tied near the corral. She could see him through the window, sitting alone, staring at the empty chair across from him. She didn't go inside, not yet. She walked to the barn, her steps heavy, and sat where the dust caught the morning light. Days passed, then weeks. The world went on. The fields turned green again, and the river ran clear after the storms. But at night, when the wind rose from the canyons, she could still hear the faint hum of his song, the one he'd sung in the cave. The song for the lost finding their way home. Sometimes she dreamed of him standing beneath the cedar tree. The sky, wide and open, the land stretching endlessly around him. In her dreams, he was never sad or hunted. He was free, part of the same wind that carried his voice across the plains. Years later, travelers spoke of an Apache who lived alone near the northern forests. Known for helping settlers cross dangerous lands and saving lost riders from storms, they said he never stayed long in one place, that he carried no weapon unless forced to fight, and that he wore around his neck a simple string where something once hung. She never spoke of him, again to her father or to anyone else. But every spring, when the rains came and the scent of wet earth filled the valley, she would ride to the ridge above the canyon and leave a small carving of a bird on the rocks, a symbol for freedom, for love that defied fear, and for the memory of a man who had taught her that gentleness could exist even in a world built on war. The wind would lift around her, brushing through the grass like a whisper, and though she couldn't see him, she always felt that he was near that somewhere, in a place where names no longer mattered. The Apache still watched over her. Love, she had learned, didn't always end in the ways stories promised. Sometimes it left you broken, sometimes it saved you, and sometimes it simply lived on carved into the heart of the land itself, where no man's hand could ever erase it.